Howdy my totally, as always, Tubular gamers, we're back with, you guessed it, another video. Thanks for coming back to the channel. So for today's video, we're going to be talking about fighting games. Yes, with it being EVO this weekend, I thought now would be the perfect time to talk about fighting games. And so for today's topic, we're going to be talking about the 15 best fighting games that I've played. Now, I think we all know what fighting games are. I'm not going to sit here for 10 minutes explaining what a fighting game is. I will just say I am a huge fan of fighting games. I've been playing fighting games for 20 plus years now. It's one of my favorite genres of video games. I've been to several EVOs now. Like, fighting games are pretty awesome, and that's why this is such a big video. It's the top 15 greatest fighting games of all time, in my opinion. Now, I have not played every single fighting game ever made, and so there's a very good chance that I could be missing a game, or shoot, I could be missing an entire series. I've really never played any of the BlazBlue games, so that's not going to be on here. But I'll tell you what's going to be on here. Only one game from each series. Yes, I am only choosing a single game from each series. Otherwise, this list would just be full of a few series. And so let me reiterate, I'm only choosing what I believe to be the peak of each series for this list. And you know, all I can say is it really does not matter what I put on this list. There's no way you're going to agree with me because it's my personal list. This list is based off of my experiences, my memories, how much fun I've had with these games, what I perceive as depth. It's very unique and personalized to me and only me. And so let me know down below what your favorite fighting games of all time, what your list would look like, etc, etc. I'm always lurking down below in the comments. Let me know how you're feeling. Let's not waste any more time. Let's just get right into it. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you so much. I really do appreciate all the support. So let's get it started in here. What's number 15? Number 15. Darkstalkers 3, also known as Vampire Savior World of Darkness. Now, Darkstalkers is a pretty underrated series of fighting games. I feel like the merchandise has sold more than the actual games have, and I think Vampire Survivor is a bit underrated. It's one of Capcom's better fighting games. Seeing a bunch of crazy classic monsters coming together to duke it out, it's a pretty awesome premise. This game introduced Jeddah, who would go on to be in several other Capcom games, and the roster is actually really great. While not everybody returns from the prior two games, this game introduced a few characters that would, like Jeddah, go on to be in other Capcom games, like BB Hood. Who doesn't like BB Hood? The roster was pretty awesome, and if you're looking at the gameplay, you can immediately see that the game looks very good as well. I love the aesthetic and art style of this game. Like, the prior two games had it, but this game really capitalizes on it to look different from them and just look different from most fighting games. Really love the aesthetic. I like the music. And the game really just has good vibes all around, but all of that wouldn't matter if the fighting wasn't great. And I mean, the game's on this list, so the fighting must be good. It is the best fighting, in my opinion, of the Darkstalkers series, and it's certainly the fastest. Like, this game actually gets really fast. You can jack up the speed and make it go super fast, and it can become one of the fastest fighting games of them all. I love how this game feels, though. Everyone feels pretty distinct from each other, even Lilith and Morgan, and I just love how different everybody behaves, and they all have a bunch of different unique moves and combos, and the game just has a good flow to it. It becomes very satisfying to start chaining together some big combos. The game even has this new damage gauge system where instead of it being 2 rounds, it's 2 health bars, kind of like Killer Instinct, and all around I just feel like this game has a decent amount of depth. When it comes to Darkstalkers competitively, yeah, they're playing Vampire Savior. I know there's like 2 games after, but this is the fan favorite, and I quite enjoy this game. And while Darkstalkers and its characters are more well known from Marvel vs. Capcom and other Capcom games, it's great to see that their own actual game is good. If you've ever been curious about Darkstalkers or Morgan or any of the characters, you should get the Capcom Fighting Collection, as it does include like the entire series. But just know Darkstalkers 3, yeah, it's a good one. And so our next game is certainly unconventional, and it's Def Jam Fight for New York. Now, normally I don't really care all that much for games like this. This game does run on the same engine as the first game, which was like a modified engine of the WWF No Mercy game. And so yeah, this game is basically a wrestling game, but it is the wrestling game. I'm not big on wrestling games. Like, I've had a little bit of fun with them, but I don't love them. But then there's Def Jam Fight for New York. This game is great, and all these years later, it is still great. So yeah, it is a 3D 3D fighting game, and it is very akin to a wrestling game, complete with momentum, Irish whips, and even taunting. And then there's actually several different fighting styles, and on top of that you have just a great selection of rappers to play as, and even some celebrities like Danny Trejo show up here, just to name a few of the rappers you can play as in the game. Snoop Dogg shows up, Method Man, Lil Flip, Scarface, Ghostface Killah, Ice-T, and even Ludacris shows up here. If you know rap from the 90s and the 2000s, yeah, this roster is pretty awesome. Obviously nowadays I'm sure plenty of people are like, who even are any of the people you just mentioned outside of Snoop Dogg, but this game's roster for the time was pretty amazing, and it's definitely the best roster of any of the Def Jam games. And naturally the soundtrack and just the general presentation is top notch. I mean, how could the soundtrack not be just kind of goated? It's literally by Def Jam. It's fantastic. Now when it comes to what you can actually do in this game, obviously there is, you know, the multiplayer where you can just beat the absolute shit out of each other with several different fighting styles, power moves, etc. All of that is pretty fun, but this game even has a story mode, and the story mode's actually pretty cool in this game as well. It's actually very fleshed out, where you get to create your own character and you're just trying to make it in the New York underground. I have fond memories of this story mode, and even more fun playing with my friends. This game just gets absolutely wild. Like, you can just crank this game up to 11. Certain stages are crazy. There's like weapons. The fighting is obviously not the most traditional, and I'm not going to act like this game just has an absolute ton of depth, because well, it doesn't have a ton of depth, but what it does have is fun factor. Like, it doesn't matter if it was the mid-2000s, mid-2010s, or now the mid-2020s, this game is just stupid fun. Like, anyone can pick up and play this game, but you can actually get pretty raw at it. There's even a competitive scene for this game, which was just a marvel to see, to be honest. And again, while I don't know if it's got a ton of depth to it, it's got a competitive scene for a reason. It's because so many other people have fond memories with this game. It's just so much fun. It's satisfying. There's a bunch of different power moves. There's different stances. All of the characters play decently unique and have their own moveset. And I think anybody that's ever had fun with legit any wrestling game is going to have fun with this game. It doesn't reinvent the wheel for games like this, but out of all the wrestling-like games I've played, Fight for New York really is my favorite. The game is getting pretty pricey these days, and I'm sure it'd be a nightmare to try to remaster, but here's holding out hope that someday we can get a remaster of this game. Well, from one unconventional fighting game to the next, we have Power Stone 2. Now, Power Stone 2 does not play anything like a traditional fighting game, a traditional 3D fighting game. It doesn't even play like a wrestling game like Def Jam did. You're just kind of dropped into these arenas and you can just beat the shit out of each other, or use pickups to further beat the crap out of each other. You can get the power stones to power up, and just like Fight for New York, this game doesn't have a ton of depth and strategy. You're not going to be labbing combos out or anything like that, but what Power Stone 2 has is also that fun factor. Man, Power Stone 2 is so much fun. This is some of the most fun I've had with any fighting game, especially in a party or group setting. Like hooking up the Dreamcast, getting out all the controllers, and then just playing some good old Power Stone 2. This game is so much fun. The second game actually adds quite a bit from the original game with more stages, abilities, the fighting's better, and that gameplay loop really does come together. Sure, it is a little lacking on the modes, especially for single player. There's just really not a whole lot to do, but in a party setting, oh, this game absolutely slaps. There isn't a ton of amazing 4-player fighting games outside of Smash or really any platform fighter, but Power Stone 2 is absolutely up there. It's got an interesting cast of characters, with most of them returning from the first game, but they all have their own little differences. I also really appreciate the stages here. They all do something different, they all mix things up, and even like bosses show up on them. They just get absolutely wild. The power-ups make things even more wild. On top of this, soundtrack's great, presentation's good, pretty solid frame rate throughout. It's really just kind of a wonder that this game hasn't been re-released on modern platforms. Yes, of course, there's the PSP version and there's always going to be Fightcade, but I'm telling you, if they brought this to PS4, PS5, they didn't even need to upgrade the graphics. I think this game would do pretty well, especially in an online setting. It's a ton of fun. I'm sure some people are going to roll their eyes and be like, really? You're going to say Power Stone 2 is one of the best fighting games ever? Might not be one of the best, but it's absolutely one of my favorites, and that's why I've got it here. And while it's not the most widely available, I think that if you ever see it set up at maybe a convention or someone's house, you should give it a shot. Alright, here we got a bit more of a traditional fighting game. We have Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, there have been a lot of Dragon Ball fighting games over the years, and I really haven't played like any of them. Really, the only one I've given a decent amount of time to is FighterZ. I have played quite a bit of this game. And so with that perspective in mind, FighterZ is the best Dragon Ball fighting game, the best Dragon Ball game ever made. I mean, if you're someone who even kind of likes Dragon Ball, like you're just an itty bitty fan, I think you're gonna like this game. This game just has so much fan service, tons of characters, and it's a great fighting game all around. The art style is fantastic, perfectly replicating what the show had. The presentation in general is just top notch with tons of great attention to detail. The game has so many references to the Dragon Ball franchise in general, like there really is just a ton of fan service. And when it comes to the characters, oh, it's great. It doesn't go wild like the Budokai Tenkaichi games, but the fan service and the character roster is very good. And there's even a ton of DLC adding more and more to this game. When it comes to the actual fighting, it gets pretty hectic, really taking advantage of what Dragon Ball is known for. You do these big epic fights with these long combos, and yeah, at first it might take a little bit of time to get used to, but I think this game has a great mix of casual fun and hardcore fun. It's pretty easy to pick up and do a few basic combos here and there, but it does get very hard to master. I'm not going to act like I'm anywhere near pro for this game. I suck ass, and I'm not afraid to admit it, but I think this game is a heck of a lot of fun. I've had some fun with my friends on this one, but I've actually had some fun in the single player as well. This game does have content. It has a story mode that has a decent length to it. It's not great, and the story's not amazing, but it's got a story mode. It's got some other single player content. The online even just recently got rollback, and I haven't had any issues with the online, but what I have had issues with is the menus and the lobby shit. Man, why can't we just get a normal menu? Arc System Works games love these like walk around lobby things, man. Get on out of here. But Dragon Ball FighterZ really is the Dragon Ball game. It's one of the best fighting games of the modern era. It finally isn't at EVO, but that doesn't discount how great the game still is. If you've ever been a fan of anime or Dragon Ball and haven't tried this yet, I really don't know what you're waiting for. Fighters is just a really solid game. And so our next game is Capcom vs SNK 2. Oh yeah, we're pulling out all the classics if you couldn't tell. Now this game came out like right at the end of Capcom's golden era of fighting games, and I feel like it's been kind of forgotten over the years. It's easily the best Capcom SNK crossover game by like a landslide, and it's just a great fighting game. Obviously, with the game's title, you can expect plenty of Capcom and SNK characters, and I think the roster is really great. There's a good amount of Street Fighter and Darkstalkers, but there's a few other Capcom characters in there, and then when it comes to SNK, yeah, it's mostly Fatal Fury and King of Fighters, but there's a few extras thrown in there, and I think it's pretty good. The game still utilizes a team mechanic, but it's a lot better implemented than what the first game had, and it feels a lot more balanced. I like the team mechanic here, and I think it adds a decent amount of strategy. And then when it comes to how the game plays, oh, it's a very competent, solid 2D fighter, and it's actually quite a bit of fun. There's a good amount of depth here. It's not super stiff, it's not SNK stiff, but it's not as smooth as a typical Capcom fighter. But, like a juicy, fat, round butt, I wouldn't say this is one of those games where you can just pick it up and immediately start doing some cool combos and cool shit. Even if you know some of these characters, it takes a little bit of practice. It's not as stiff as like King of Fighters, but it's just got a little bit of a unique feel. I really do like that feel. Something else that I really love about this game is the presentation. These sprites just look so damn good, and then the soundtrack's low-key goated. Like, it is so good in this game. There's so many bumpin' tunes that it's not even funny. Like a few other games on this list, I really hope in the future it does get re-released. It absolutely deserves it. It's a classic, and if you haven't tried it and you like Capcom crossover games, like another game that'll show up on this list sooner than later, then I absolutely think that this game is worth playing. It's got the roster, it's got a good amount of fan service, a sweet-ass presentation and soundtrack, and it's actually decently balanced, especially compared to the first game, which got kinda whack. What I'm trying to say is game good. Yeah. And so in the number 10 spot, we have Killer Instinct, and this is the 2013 game to be specific. Now, I love Killer Instinct. I played the older games a decent amount as a teenager, and I remember when they announced this, I was really excited. It was the first new Killer Instinct game in seriously like 15 years, and it was going to be an Xbox One launch title. I even got to play the game early at a pre-release event for the Xbox One. It was one of the reasons I got an Xbox One at launch. That and for Dead Rising 3, and all I will say is that this game did not disappoint. initially it might have been a little weak, but it quickly got updated and they added more and more to it, and nowadays I really do think that it is one of the best modern fighting games and one of the best fighting games of all time. It's my favorite of the Killer Instinct games, and I would actually say that this game is a little bit underrated. So this game is a complete reboot of the series. The story starts over, and while the story's never really been the focus of Killer Instinct, what is cool is that there's actually multiple endings for the characters. I think that's a neat touch. Now when it comes to this game's roster, it is fantastic. Every single character from the older KI games is here. There's some new characters and there's some really awesome guest characters. Arbiter from Halo's here, General Rom from Gears of War, which that is awesome. And then even the Battletoads show up. Rash is here. The roster is just straight up peak for KI, like I don't know if it's ever going to get any better than this. I really love the roster and I love how all the characters are quite different from each other. Everyone feels decently different from each other, and then they all have a bunch of combos. Killer Instinct has always been known as the combo game, where you can do the auto combos and you can just string these insane combos together, and this game is all about that. You're stringing together these huge combos, and while I know this gameplay style isn't for everybody, I think it's incredibly fun. It's smooth, the game feels great, it's super satisfying to pull off these big combos, and then of course the combo breaker is here, and along with some other special moves, I believe that there's a good amount of depth to this game. I'm not going to act like it's the most technical fighting game, but there's certainly more depth here than Power Stone 2. Yeah, I can confirm that one. But seriously, the fighting, it's nice, the character roster, it's good, and I think the presentation is fantastic. While this game might have had a kind of rocky launch with only a few characters, nowadays, it really is a powerhouse of a fighting game, and if you've ever had any interest in KI or what you see interests you at all, then I think it is worth checking out. I wouldn't say this game is thriving in the competitive scene, but there still is a scene for this game. I'm kind of hoping in the future we get a sequel to this game, but I'm pretty hesitant at this point. Still, at least we got this game, and 10 plus years later, it's pretty good. And so here we have Garou Mark of the Wolves, the last in the Fatal Fury series until very recently. Garou has really gone on to be like the fan favorite of the entire franchise. It's my favorite of the whole franchise. They dropped all the gimmicks and little extra additions that just really weren't needed from the other Fatal Fury games, like the 2 lanes and jumping between them, for a bit more of a traditional experience, but a better one in my opinion. When it comes to the roster, it's actually pretty wild. Like barely anybody returns from the older Fatal Fury games. It's like a new generation, but this is one of those times where I think it's good that it has a new generation. I think the roster is actually pretty great. A few of the fan favorites are there, but it's mostly new people, and these would go on to be some of the most recognizable, best characters from SNK. And the whole next generation and all the new characters actually really plays into the story and theme of this game, taking place way in the future after the prior Fatal Fury games, and a lot of these characters are actually in older Fatal Fury games, but they're much younger. So here, they're grown up and they're ready to hit the street. Something else you can probably notice just from watching even 30 seconds of this game is that it just oozes personality. The sprites are so good in this game. Like, it just looks great, the animation's really solid, and the soundtrack is really good as well. All of this wouldn't matter though if the fighting wasn't good, and as you can see where it is on the list, the fighting is pretty good. It feels really nice. It's a lot smoother than really any of the other Fatal Fury games. It has a great flow. It's satisfying to do combos. It's fun to link the combos. It's kind of easy to pick up and play, but it really is hard to master. It can be a little stiff at times. It's not as ridiculous as like King of Fighters, but it'll take a little bit of time to get used to. As someone who played through the entire franchise, this really felt like a breath of fresh air. It just feels so much better than legit any other Fatal Fury game. On top of the awesome roster and then just the unique aesthetic, this game is just immediately a certified banger, and if you've ever been a fan of SNK's fighting games, I really think you should try Garou. It is like one of the fan favorites, and with the new Fatal Fury coming out sooner than later, it's totally worth going back and trying this game. I think it has aged very well, and it still is a very competent fighting game. And so here we have Samurai Showdown, specifically the 2019 game. Now, Samurai Showdown is a very long-standing fighting game series with a lot of games and a really storied history, and out of all of the games, I really think the best is the latest one. The 2019 game really looked at like the original Samurai Showdown. They really went back to the roots and figured out what the series was all about to begin with. They brought it into the modern era, added a few quality of life improvements here and there, and they created really one of the most satisfying fighting games ever. Like, this game, I'll just immediately say, is stupidly satisfying. Now, Samurai Showdown is not fast. fast. It doesn't have a bunch of combos or complex inputs. It's all about taking your time and doing a few methodical attacks. Like, you can just completely destroy someone in under 10 hits. And it's all about countering, parrying, knowing when to strike. Timing is a huge thing here, and just doing those big uber damage moments where you seriously just do mondo damage and take off like a fourth of somebody's health bar, and it just feels so good in this game. I know some people are probably a little confused I have this game as high as it is, but it just felt so good. The character roster is pretty solid with a bunch of the characters from the older games returning, a few new ones here. The story's pretty cool too, and it actually plays into the older games, so there is a little bit of fan service. I think the presentation is pretty solid as well. It is a nice art style, it runs incredibly smooth, and the soundtrack's actually pretty decent. Then it actually has a decent amount of content. There's some single player content here, and then of course online. Sure, it doesn't have the most alive and kicking fan base, but there still is people playing this game. There's still a lot of people that really love Samurai Showdown and think that this is one of the best of the whole series. There's a passionate, small, dedicated fan base to this game. I've seen it at EVO pretty much every year since it's come out. And unless a new Samurai Showdown comes out sooner than later, I'm sure people are going to be playing this game for a long time, because again, it just feels so good when you're able to get those absolutely just massive slashes in and just totally wreck someone's day. Like, you could just stop someone in their tracks. There's really not another fighting game series like Samurai Showdown where every single hit matters. And it really does feel like there is a good amount of strategy here. The older Samurai Showdown games are pretty great as well, but I feel like this one really just hit the nail on the head, and I loved it. And our next game is Guilty Gear Strive. Now, the Guilty Gear series has been going on for quite a long time, but it's one of those series that in my opinion just kept getting better and better, with each new entry really being better than the last, excluding the spin-offs. And Strive is the pinnacle of that in my opinion. And Strive is certainly the pinnacle of Guilty Gear's popularity. I have never seen Guilty Gear this popular, especially in the competitive scene. It's actually very healthy, and there's a reason for that. Strive is freaking awesome, man. I knew from the moment I tried it that yes, this is a very competent, awesome fighter. Not only does it just look absolutely amazing, like, I just love the aesthetic and the vibe that this game has. The soundtrack is amazing, but the roster's great, and then the game just feels really nice. It's incredibly smooth, easy to just pick up and mess around in, but it is quite hard to master. You got to master several different mechanics. All of the characters feel vastly different from each other. They have pretty awesome distinct movesets for the most part. And I know there are plenty of people that have said that Strive doesn't have the depth or complexity that Exerd had, but I really think it has a better flow and pace to it. I just really like how fights play out in this game, and there really hasn't been a time when I picked it up and didn't have a good time, whether it was by myself in the games like single player modes, or of course with friends. The online mode is excellent outside of the stupid lobby, and the game has had a ton of characters added thanks to all the DLC. Sure, it does not have every single Guilty Gear character ever, but I think it's got a pretty healthy roster here. And again, I like how just generally different the characters feel from each other, even if there is a little less depth than say Exerd. But man, that presentation, like, I really just can't get enough of that. That counter, like, it is so good. The music really slaps. The game just looks absolutely incredible at all times. Super smooth frame rate. Presentation is honestly off the chain. This game is off the chain. Strive's pretty cheap now. It's even on Game Pass. If you like fighting games at all and you haven't tried Strive, I really don't know what you're waiting for on this one. The Guilty Gear train is here. It is as popular as it's ever been, and now's the best time to get in. Alright, you knew Soul Calibur had to be somewhere on the list, but which game am I going with? Soul Calibur 2 for the GameCube, baby. I love this game. When it comes to the Soul Calibur series, I'm honestly a bit up and down on it. Like, I love the original game. That is an excellent fighting game, but 3, 4, and 5 I'm a bit more mixed on, and then 6 is actually pretty good, but my favorite really is always going to be 2, and it's not just nostalgia. I've come back to this game several times over the last few years, and every single time I play it, I'm just immediately wowed by how well it's aged and how much fun it still is. And it still feels unique all these years later, being a weapon-based 3D fighter. Like, it just has a really unique feel to it, and again, it doesn't really matter when you're playing this game, back when it came out, maybe 10 years later, maybe now, it still feels really good. Like, it has a great feel to it, a nice flow. The pacing is really solid in these fights. They're actually pretty quick, and I just love how to the point it is. I've played several fighting games where it feels like it can just take forever to get into the fighting, and then the fights themselves can feel a little drawn out. None not in Soul Calibur 2. Soul Calibur 1 had this as well, but I think 2's is even better, man. That pacing is so good. The fighting feels really nice. You can do just uber damage with certain combos and big moves, and it feels really satisfying. When it comes to the roster, it might be the best roster of the whole series. I mean, 6's is really good as well. Obviously, there's the guest characters that are fantastic. Heihachi, Spawn, and of course, Link. I mean, freaking Link is in there. That's pretty good, but the roster outside of them is actually pretty good with a lot of the fan favorites and returning characters from the first game. I'm not going to act like it's crazy balanced because honestly, Soul Calibur's never been all that balanced. The moment Nightmare shows up, shit just gets messed up, but if you don't play with Nightmare, I think it's decently balanced. And sure, while there's not a ton of depth to the fighting in this game like some other fighting games, I still think there is enough depth to have a lot of fun with this game. There's a decent amount of single player content, and then multiplayer, man, I've been playing multiplayer for this game for 15 years at this point, and it really just never gets old. Like, whether you're learning some new moves, you're trying out another character, you're getting the funny ass ring outs, like Soul Calibur 2 is just one of those games for me that just never gets old. Like, it really doesn't, and that's why all these years later I still love it and absolutely recommend the hell out of it. Alright, it's Mortal Kombat time, and when it comes to the best Mortal Kombat, there's really only one choice in my opinion, and that is Mortal Kombat 9. MK has really been just through the ringer when it comes to quality. Like, some Mortal Kombat games are just absolutely awful, and some of them are really good. Like, Mortal Kombat 10 is also a great Mortal Kombat, but my favorite's always going to be MK9. This game really brought the franchise back after it had been, shall we say, floundering for a few years, and it's definitely the Mortal Kombat I've put the most amount of time into, not just in the single player, but the multiplayer as well. When it comes to the single player, I remember it was like a revelation. It was like, wow, they actually have like a ton of single player stuff. There's the story mode, the arcade mode, the crypt. Like, the single player mode all these years later is still really good despite it being stupidly difficult. Like, they even brought back the cheating AI from the old games. How nice of them. And then the multiplayer, ooh, I've had so many great memories playing Mortal Kombat 9. It actually had team battles, which like no Mortal Kombat has had since, where you could legit have 2 players team up and fight 2 more players, which was great. I remember for the time it wasn't laggy and actually was really smooth. Local multiplayer has always been good. MK9 has absolutely always had it when it came to content and modes, but when it comes to the fighting, I also think this is really where Mortal Kombat had it maybe the best. I mean, Mortal Kombat 10 might have slightly better fighting and mechanics, but I just love Mortal Kombat 9's feel. It doesn't feel as smooth as most modern fighting games. It has a little bit of weight and even jank to it, but Mortal Kombat's kind of always had that, and I feel like they did a really good job of bringing that into the modern era, or at least modern for the time. Stuff like holding a button to block, which is certainly not traditional for a 2D fighting game, but it eventually becomes second nature. I really like how this game feels, and it actually has a good speed to it. Mortal Kombat has always kind of had an issue with speed, with some games just feeling really slow, and that is not the issue with this game. It has a good speed, there's a ton of combos, and then the roster, ooh, the roster is fantastic. Like, all of the classic characters from the first few games are here, and a few extras, and I've always just really loved it. Sure, not all of the characters are crazy different from each other. I mean, they weren't in the original game, and you don't have like an absolute ton of combos. When it comes to the depth, it's not as much as a few other games on this list, but it really is just so much fun. On top of that, of course, it's Mortal Kombat. You gotta talk about the fatalities. They're very gory and violent, and they were the best ever at the time, and even nowadays, they're still really good. And something else that really puts this game at the top for me for Mortal Kombat games is that there's no gimmicks. Mortal Kombat 10, 11, and even 1 have little gimmicks attached to them, and to be honest, I don't really want that for Mortal Kombat. I want it just a lot more straightforward, like how we have it here, where there's one moveset for the characters, you choose a character, and that's it. There's no partners, there's no alternate styles or weapons or anything. You just choose a character and that's it. I think Mortal Kombat is best when it's simplistic, and I really love MK9. Okay, best fighting games ever list, and it doesn't have Street Fighter. That's not going to happen. Here we have Street Fighter. Which one am I going with? You probably already can tell I'm going with Street Fighter 6. Now, yes, Street Fighter 6 is the newest game in the series, and we don't know how it's going to do like very long term. I definitely have more time in Street Fighter 4, but from the moment I booted up 6, I've just absolutely loved it. I feel like this game just kind of brings fighting games forward. It feels like we're in a new era, like post Street Fighter 6. It feels like this game really wants to get everybody into fighting games, like it does its darndest to get as many people into fighting games thanks to new control styles and its accessibility, but it's also there on a hardcore level. It has the fundamentals and it has a ton of depth. Seriously, Street Fighter 6's depth is really awesome with all these new mechanics implemented from various other Street Fighter games. The roster's really solid. There's a bunch of returning characters and it feels like these characters have grown up, they've evolved, they've changed a little bit, and there's some newcomers here as well. I think the roster, especially the starting roster, was actually really good. Street Fighter 6 had a very good launch also. If you look back at Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter 4, shit, even like Street Fighter 3, those first versions of the games, yeah, they were good, but they got so much better over time with all the other additions, and this game is already hella good from the start, so I would only imagine it would get better and better. And it also feels incredibly complete. Like, not only is there a ton of multiplayer options for the hardcore and the casual side of things, but the game has a lot of single player content as well. You get to totally customize your character in a great character creator, but there's a full-on story mode here. Yeah, there's some beat 'em up combat where it's kind of like Final Fight out here. I mean, there's even plenty of references to it, and that might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's pretty cool that it's here. It's actually pretty lengthy as well, and then in my experiences, the online has just been spectacular. Like, I've had no issues, and it's immediately apparent that this is maybe the best online Street Fighter has really ever had. This is like the best feel Street Fighter has ever had also. It feels so good. They've really just perfected the feel of fighting games, it feels like, at this point in time, and Street Fighter 6 might be the apex of that. And then the presentation, I mean, it looks so good. This game has such an awesome personality and style to it. I did not like how Street Fighter 5 looks so bland, and this game, it really rectifies that. I just love the aesthetic. I love how animated everybody is, and I love all the flashing colors. It looks really nice. The soundtrack is just fantastic as well. So many good tunes here. It's been a little over a year since this game came out, and it really has so far just gotten better and better, and it's the most popular game at EVO this year, and it's really not a surprise. Street Fighter 6 is phenomenal, and I only expect it to get better and better. And if you're someone who's ever had any interest in any fighting game, I think Street Fighter 6 might be the most accessible, approachable fighting game to release in the last few years. Like, it really is made for everybody. And I think Capcom deserves a lot of praise for that, because fighting games, at times, they can be a bit isolating. This game, though, oh, it's so good. And here we have it. We're in the top 3 now. We have one of my favorite games of all time, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I absolutely love this game to death. I have played the ever-loving hell out of this game. I love the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise. The original's great. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is also really great. It was very close between MVC2 and MVC3 here, but I had to go with MVC2. I've been playing this game for like almost 20 years now, and it really just never gets old. It doesn't matter what platform I'm playing it on, it doesn't matter who I'm playing it with or what year it is. It really is just one of those games that never gets old, kind of like Soul Calibur 2, but even more. Like, this game just excels for so many reasons. It's easy to pick up and understand, but it's hard to master. There's a ton of depth, there's a ton to understand with the combat, and then it actually feels really good still. It's aged incredibly well, and even if you only play modern fighting games, I think you're gonna have no problem picking this game up and understanding how it works pretty much immediately. And then there's what really just carries this game into goated territory, and that's the soundtrack, of course. I want to take you for a ride, man. This shit is so good. All of the soundtrack is just absolutely banging, popping, smacking, whatever you want to call it. This shit is so good. I could glaze it all day, whatever the kids say, skibbity toilet. I love the soundtrack. Okay, what really makes this game goated is the characters. This game has a fantastic character selection with like every fighting game character that had appeared in a Capcom game up until that point. There's so many Street Fighter characters, other fan favorite Capcom characters. The Marvel side is just excellent with a ton of X-Men and other fan favorites. It really is just amazing. And then it's teams of 3. There is just hundreds of combinations you can have, and that's one of the reasons why it feels like this game never gets old. You can just try so many combinations, and some of them obviously work better than others. I mean, Cable Sentinel's always going to be really good, but like, there's just so many combinations, and I feel like every time I play the game, I think of a new combination to try, and I really can't say that about any other game, not even Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. but I also haven't played that game as much as this. I think the presentation is really solid outside of the soundtrack. I mean, the soundtrack is just gold, but the presentation is really solid, and what really excites me the most is that it's coming back. This game was notorious for being just kind of hard to play nowadays. There was like the 360 and PS3 version, but it was delisted ages ago, but it's finally coming back. Free MVC2 finally worked. We're getting it re-released. It's getting online play and cross-play. If you have at all ever had any interest in this series, this game, or fighting games in general, I really recommend you check it out. Check out, you know, the physical version of the game that they can't break into your house and steal. They can't delist the cartridge or the disc from your house out here. Anyway, that's a discussion for a different day. Marvel vs. Capcom 2. This game is pretty much just goated thanks to its amazing combat, roster, music. It's just a legendary video game at this point, and I have so many memories with it. It's not even funny. Like, there is no laughter, there is no jokes, there is no LMAO, none of that. It's just all serious here. Game is amazing. I'm sure some people are going to roll their eyes, but I have a Smash Brothers game this high, and it's Smash Ultimate. I mean, what really is there to say about Smash Ultimate at this point? I've been playing the Super Smash Brothers series for 20 plus years, and it's not even close. Ultimate really is the best. Melee is an excellent game. I also love Brawl, and the Wii U game was pretty solid too, but Ultimate really just blows them all out of the water with easily the best feel of any Smash game. It just feels so freaking nice. And it just hits in all the right spots. It's satisfying when you do big hits. It's got depth when there's actually a ton of combos. It can actually get quite technical, and it's really easy to immediately see why so many people are drawn to this game competitively, but it also works perfectly as a casual game. Extremely easy to pick up and have fun with. The perfect party game. It's both, and I've had plenty of fun with both sides, whether I was being competitive one-on-one with my friends or we're just having fun. You know, you turn the items on, you might even do an 8-player Smash. This game absolutely works as both, and it's just the best in its genre when it comes to that. Like, there's no other platform fighter that's even close to this game, and none of them feel as refined or nice as this game. And then we have everything else. I mean, the fighting might be fantastic, but there's not any characters or any good modes or anything. It's not really going to matter. Smash Ultimate doesn't have to worry about that. It's got the modes, it's got the characters, the presentation, the soundtrack. It's all excellent. When it comes to the characters, it's untouchable. It really is like the greatest of all time, especially with the DLC. Every character from all the prior games, so many new characters, so many third-party characters. A lot of them genuinely do feel different from each other outside of some of the clones. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Sure, it might not be the absolute most balanced game. I mean, it's kind of hard with so many characters, but the character roster is beyond impressive. I don't know how this will ever be topped, and I don't think it'll ever be topped. Like, how does it get any better than this? Genuinely, I have no idea how it gets better than this. The character roster is just unbelievably good. And then almost every stage from the prior games returns. They've all been remade. The stages are just so good. I love the stages in this game. Even the shit stages like Rainbow Cruise return. It's awesome. A bunch of the items, really like almost every item actually returns. The game has a decent amount of single player content. It's got a story mode that most people don't like, but I actually really enjoy this, and it's pretty lengthy. Like, it's not as good as Brawl's story mode, but I actually do think the story mode is quite fun in this game. And then, of course, all the classic modes return like Classic, and then All-Stars got a new version. There's a bunch of challenges. Like, this game is brimming with content. And then the online, yeah, some people really don't like it, and it doesn't work all the time, but I think for the most part, it's decent enough. I'm not going to act like it's as reliable or stable as plenty of the other games I've talked about today, but it's okay. I'm not going to act like it's unplayable or the worst thing ever. I mean, it's a big step forward from Brawl in the Wii U game, at least in my experiences, and it certainly could be better, but it is what it is. I think Smash is just always one of those games that's best in person, and I know some people are going to frown and dislike that I've Smash this high on the list, but hey, it's not number one. It's very, very close, though, and when it comes to my favorite games of all time, Smash Ultimate, it's pretty high up there. It very well might be like my favorite Switch game of all time. And so here we have it, my absolute favorite fighting game of all time, and I'm cheating. I have a few games on here. So you probably noticed that Tekken has not been on this list at all, and that's because Tekken's in the #1 spot. But when it comes down to which Tekken game I think is my favorite or what I think is the best, I'm actually really torn. I might have ranked the Tekken games in the past, but thinking about which one is my favorite or what I believe to truly be the best, it's actually pretty difficult. But there are a few Tekken Tekken games I like more than the others. I'm going with 4 games here. Yeah, I know I'm cheating, but hey, it's my list. I can do whatever I want, I guess. I'm going with Tekken 3, Tekken 5, Tekken 7, and Tekken 8. I believe all 4 of these games are on such a similar quality that it becomes very difficult to say that one game is definitively better than the others. This is really the pinnacle of the Tekken series, and in my opinion, the best fighting games have ever got. I absolutely love all 4 of these games, and I have played the shit out of all of them. Even Tekken 8, I've been playing Tekken 8 all year, and it's just been fantastic. When it comes to Tekken 3, it really changed the game for fighting games. It's easily the best fighting game on the PS1, and it's still crazy playable nowadays. Like, it has aged incredibly. The roster's good. It introduced some of my favorites like Eddie Gordo. The presentation, while it has aged, I still think it's really good. The soundtrack is excellent. It had a bunch of single player modes and some fun fan service. Tekken 3 really is an amazing game. And then Tekken 5, well, Tekken 5 did basically the same thing, really improving on Tekken 4, bringing the fighting even further along. It feels really great still. It feels amazing. The roster's great. There's a bunch of content here. It even has like a little story mode thing. Tekken 5, also a really good one that people absolutely love. Probably the best fighting game on PS2. And then we have Tekken 7, which I have played the shit out of. I've probably played Tekken 7 more than any of these games, particularly in the online, which I think is amazing. Tekken 7 has a fantastic roster. It looks amazing. And then the fighting, it just really is like peak. I really love the fighting of Tekken 7. I love the online. The story mode's cool and all, and the other modes are great, but the online is really where Tekken 7 is at. And then Tekken 8, the latest game in the series, it really is just Tekken 7 too. Like, it plays just like Tekken 7. It's a bit more aggressive, and there's a few new mechanics here, but I actually really like them, and I think they add a bit to the game as well. I think Tekken 8 feels amazing. The roster so far has been pretty incredible. They're adding more and more, and the online is great. There's even a good story mode here, and they brought Tekken Ball back. Like, Tekken 8 is an excellent game, and I'm hopeful that it becomes truly the best of the Tekken series. I know it has some bullshit battle pass and the usual DLC nonsense, but I really love Tekken 8 as well, at least from what I've been playing the last few months, and all of them just feel amazing. They all have a ton of depth. These characters have so many combos and moves, especially in like Tekken 7 and 8. It's just gotten absolutely ridiculous how much depth every single character has and what kind of strings you can do. Like, it really just amazes me how many different characters there are and how different everybody feels in this game. All of the characters feel just so vastly different from each other. It's really not even funny, and this started all the way back in like the earlier Tekkens too, and it's just carried over and evolved further and further in the later games, and all of the games for the time looked amazing. But Tekken 8, oh man, this game just looks so good. I really love the Tekken franchise. It's my favorite fighting game franchise of all time. It's got modes, it's got depth, it's got so many awesome, amazing, memorable characters. The Tekken series really just slaps. I think even if you don't really like 3D fighting games or the idea of that, Tekken's the exception. There's a reason why Tekken is the most popular 3D fighting game franchise. It stuck around and was way more popular than Virtua Fighter, that's for sure. Soul Calibur is great also, but Tekken, nothing's really better than Tekken in my opinion. Of course, you can feel free to disagree. You might be one of those Tekken 4 guys and think my entire idea of having 4 games at the top is bullshit. You know what? Let me know how you're feeling. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. So I'm just going to end this one with bricks, as in what you're hopefully not going to throw through my window because you disagree with me. Let me know your favorite fighting game down below. Hope everyone has a wonderful Evo and stays safe. See you all later. Bye-bye now.